Police dog urgently barks at pregnant woman. What they discovered was incredibly transformative. Mark had seen a lot in his 10 years on the force, but nothing prepared him for this. As he pulled up outside Maplewood Community College, the sun bathed the campus in golden light, casting long shadows that danced nervously in the cool morning air. The voice on the radio crackled with urgency. Dispatch reports a possible disturbance. A woman in distress, pregnant. Instincts kicked in. He stepped out of the squad car, Rex by his side, a storm of energy ready to be unleashed. The moment Rex spotted her, he became a whirlwind of agitation, barking ferociously as they approached. Mark's heart raced. What was wrong? The woman, Sarah, clutched her belly, eyes glazed with a mix of pain and fear. As she stumbled, Mark lunged forward, catching her just in time. Their gazes locked, and for a fleeting moment, the chaos around them faded. He felt her vulnerability and desperation pulsing through the air like electricity. As they exchanged brief words, uncertainty gripped Mark. Was he equipped to handle this? His role as protector flooded through him, but so did another nagging feeling, a moral ambiguity that crept into his mind. Sarah was more than just a distressed citizen. She was the daughter of a man who had worn the badge before him, a father accused of corruption. What did it say about him, helping her when his own colleagues had painted her family with such a heavy brush? That thought hung over him like a storm cloud, heavy and oppressive. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As he guided Sarah to safety, the weight of his choices bore down heavily. He found himself caught in a tangle of his duty to uphold the law, and a dawning realization that so many in his department knew the truth but chose silence. The anguish of her gaze shook his resolve, urging him to consider what he had once taken for granted. Honesty, courage, did they mean anything when veiled by ignorance and the past? Rex, ever intuitive, settled at Mark's side, forming a silent but powerful bond with Sarah, who seemed to draw strength from the presence of both of them. But with every second they spent together, tension simmered. The questions about her father's case clawed at Mark's mind relentlessly. Each file he would need to study tonight would cut deeper into his ideals, forcing him to confront his own sense of loyalty. Just as they prepared to delve deeper into the murky waters of truth, Mark felt a sudden pang of panic when his phone buzzed urgently. The department was closing ranks around the old case. He could almost hear his heart thumping in his chest. Would he sacrifice his integrity to safeguard the very foundation of his life? What would he do when the truth he unearthed could either destroy Sarah or resurrect a tarnished legacy? As dread crested within him, he realized the stakes were higher than he could have ever imagined, leaving him standing at the edge of a precipice, the abyss yawning wide before him. The phone buzzed again, more insistent this time, vibrating like a warning bell in Mark's pocket. He caught a glimpse of the caller ID, Lieutenant Henderson, the last person he wanted to talk to in that moment. With a heavy sigh, he silenced the phone, resisting the urge to bolt. Instead, he turned his attention back to Sarah. Her face was still pale, but there was a flicker of hope in her eyes, a fragile light he felt compelled to protect. "Mark, I'm scared," she whispered, the weight of her fears palpable. He could sense her vulnerability, yet also something deeper, the determination not to become a casualty of her family's past. It galvanized him, igniting a flicker of resolve within. "You're going to be okay," Mark said, though he could barely convince himself. Rex shifted slightly, pressing his flank against Sarah's leg, a protective instinct radiating from the dog. She smiled weakly at the canine, perhaps finding comfort in his presence. Mark felt a swell of pride for Rex. The dog had an uncanny ability to read emotions, offering solace without the need for words. It reminded Mark of what it meant to truly protect, to guard not just with force, but with compassion. Taking a deep breath, Mark leaned closer. "We need to figure out what's happening. I won't let you face this alone." It was more than a promise. It was a turning point. Until now, he had been consumed by his role, caught in the web of duty and expectations. But the urgency of the moment was peeling away those layers. He was no longer just an officer. He was a confidant, a shield against unrelenting scrutiny. Leaving Sarah momentarily in the care of Rex, Mark stepped back to collect his thoughts. The decision to investigate her father's case loomed large. He had spent years suppressing doubts and fears about the corruption allegations, but now they roared to the surface, demanding confrontation. For the first time, he visualized himself as an agent of change rather than a passive participant in a broken system. He was aware of the repercussions that awaited him. Several officers within the department could retaliate. The camaraderie of the badge often blurred lines, creating an unwritten code that favored loyalty over truth. But the thought of letting Sarah down was unbearable. In that fleeting moment, the scales of justice tipped in her favor. Aware that time was slipping away, Mark made a vow. He would pursue the truth, regardless of where it might lead. The awareness that Sarah was carrying not only her child, but also the weight of her family's reputation spurred him on. He sat across from her, a new plan formulating in his mind. If he could examine the evidence with fresh eyes, perhaps he could uncover layers others had ignored or suppressed. But then, another realization hit him like a tidal wave. The district attorney had always dismissed Sarah's father as just another disgraced officer. But what if Mark approached this from a different angle? What if he could thread his way through the existing narratives, drawing attention to overlooked details? This could change the trajectory of everyone involved, including his own career. With newfound determination, Mark turned to Sarah, who was watching him intently. "You deserve to know the truth." Just as he opened his mouth to reveal his intentions, he caught sight of a figure approaching in the distance. A tall man in a uniform, striding with a purpose. Henderson had arrived. The moment had come to face the implications of his choices, but Mark could sense a turning point. Would he stand firm in his resolve, or would the weight of his colleagues' expectations force him to retreat? The air crackled with tension as the lieutenant closed the distance, and Mark could feel the weight of accountability pressing down upon him. He had pushed himself to the edge, but one encounter with Henderson might push him over or pull him back into the fold. The decision he faced loomed larger than the truth itself, as if the universe was testing his commitment to justice. How would he respond when the man arriving before him posed a question that could change everything? Mark's heart raced as Henderson approached, his tall silhouette casting a long shadow over the ground. There was no denying the authority that accompanied the lieutenant's presence. This was the moment that could define not just his career, but his entire sense of self. Would he crumble under the expectations, retreating into the safety of blind loyalty, or would he press forward into the uncertain, murky waters of truth he had just vowed to navigate? As Henderson drew nearer, Mark's mind whirled with questions. How could he convey his commitment to Sarah's cause without revealing the full extent of his intentions? Would Henderson demand allegiance to a code Mark was increasingly finding untenable? The thick silence was practically suffocating, dialogue hanging precariously in the air, a negative charge waiting to discharge. "Officer Mark," Henderson called out, his voice clipped. "What's the situation here?" Mark took a deep breath. He could see the skepticism in Henderson's gaze, the way it flickered to Sarah and then back to him, assessing, judging. He could feel the weight of the traditional response pressing down hard, as though obeying a reflex that had been conditioned into him. But this was no time for automatic replies. "Just checking on Sarah," he replied, infusing the words with a neutrality he wasn't truly feeling. "She's been through a lot." Henderson frowned, his brow furrowing as he took a step closer. "Is that right? Conversations can go two ways, you know. She might not be the only one worried." Mark could sense the threat lurking beneath the surface of the lieutenant's words. Hidden in that challenge was a reminder of the unspoken code that governed their lives as officers, a presumption of loyalty and silence. The memories of the department's darker days flickered in his mind. He felt a knot tightening in his stomach, a mix of fear and determination. "I'm just doing my job," he said, refusing to back down. Making sure everything is in order. There are elements here that need more scrutiny. I think we owe it to Sarah. Henderson's eyes narrowed, assessing the potential insubordination in Mark's claim. This was a pivotal moment, a defining fracture between his past compliance and the new path of resistance he was considering. It was at the crossroads of his career that he felt a surge of clarity wash over him, grounding him, almost electrifying. "I see what's happening here," Henderson barked, chasing shadows instead of dealing with reality. "You're risking your career undermining a department that's done all it can. You don't want to be the officer who chased ghosts for a lost cause. But was it truly a lost cause? Mark had witnessed the cost of misplaced loyalty too many times. The burden of protecting each other often obscured the truth, trapping innocent people in an endless cycle of ruin. He wouldn't be part of that machinery any longer. The conviction began to crystallize within him, gaining strength. "There are things that need to come to light," Mark replied, his tone steadier, more resolved. "And I'm going to discover what they are. If it costs me everything, then so be it." The lieutenant's face darkened. Displeasure morphed into barely contained anger. "You have no idea what you're saying, officer. The badge isn't as shiny when it's tarnished by betrayal." Suddenly, Mark was shaken with a rush of adrenaline. Henderson had thrown down a gauntlet, but it was a challenge he was ready to accept. Each word from the lieutenant was a flame, igniting the hidden corners of his own fears and transforming them into fierce determination. Drawing on that inner fire, Mark leaned in slightly, grounded in the convictions he was beginning to solidify. Maybe it's time for a little tarnish if it leads to something real. It's not just about the badge. It's about people, about Sarah and her child. I won't let her down. Henderson's icy glare felt momentarily disarmed, as if the acknowledgement of a higher calling for justice had struck home, if only for an instant. Yet the tension that hung in the air was as thick as ever. The standoff between them wasn't simply a matter of authority. It was a reflection of a battle within Mark, a war between comfort and integrity. As Henderson took a step back, Mark felt that he had taken a step toward himself, unearthing a conviction he had long buried beneath layers of obligation. But the risk was palpable. With every moment that passed, he could feel the eyes of the department weighing heavily upon him, swinging between loyalty and truth. What if he was right, yet utterly wrong in his execution? Just as that thought emerged, Henderson's gaze shifted sharply, breaking the moment, as he turned slightly away. "We'll see where this goes, Officer Mark, and remember, I'll be watching." As Mark watched the lieutenant depart, the finality of that conversation settled in, along with a sense of urgency. He was standing on the precipice of a potential disaster or a profound breakthrough. The essence of who he would become hung in the balance. His next steps were crucial. Determined, Mark glanced back at Sarah. Her eyes were fixed on him, a silent question lingering in the air between them. In that moment, he realized the perilous path ahead would demand more than courage. He would need every ounce of tenacity, cunning, and strength he could summon. But he would embrace it because now he understood. This was not simply about the investigation. This was the evolution of Mark. Confidence coursed through him as he turned away, forming a plan. He needed to gather evidence, find allies in the shadows, and challenge the narratives that had confined him for too long. The stakes were rising, and with them came the realization that he was no longer just an officer, but a seeker of justice entangled in a web of lies. The next steps would define not only his future, but an entire legacy. What lay ahead would test every fiber of his being, an exploratory mission unlike anything he had faced before. As he took a step forward, the sense of urgency clung to him, better than any badge could. The clock was ticking. Questions began to swirl in his mind. Who could help him navigate through the lies? Where were the answers hidden? What secrets awaited discovery? The next chapter was ready to unfold, but one question loomed large. Was he prepared to confront the consequences of the truths he might uncover? Mark felt adrenaline pulse through his veins as he stepped away from the weighty exchange with Henderson. Each heartbeat resonated with the decision he had just taken. There was a fire ignited within him, one that could not be stifled. Resolute, he began to strategize. He needed allies, voices that echoed his newfound resolve. The thought lingered in his mind as he navigated the corridors of the precinct. The walls echoed with casual laughter and mundane conversations, but Mark felt detached. He no longer belonged to that world of comfortable ignorance. He was a lone wolf now, at odds with the prevailing culture. As he walked through the main hall, familiar faces became strangers. Officers mingled, bent over paperwork, but Mark's purpose sharpened his focus. He had questions that demanded answers, and he had an idea of who might hold some key information. Maggie, an analyst in the department, had managed to pry open the lid of sealed documents on numerous occasions. She was discreet, but tenacious. Mark had always respected her diligence, and shared an unspoken camaraderie. He had to approach her without drawing attention. While staring at her desk piled high with papers, Mark noticed Maggie's intentional meticulousness. She was already analyzing something on her computer screen. A slight furrowing of her brow revealed her immersion. Approaching her cautiously, he cleared his throat, and she glanced up, surprised. "Maggie," he began, trying to lower his voice. "Do you have a moment?" She leaned back in her chair, her eyes narrowing with curiosity. "Sure, Mark, what's up? I need your expertise on something sensitive." He paused, weighing his words. "It's regarding the investigation into Sarah's case. I think there might be something bigger at play." Her expression turned serious, and she leaned closer. "Go on." "I believe there's a network of cover-ups. I'm not just talking about minor discrepancies. I mean serious systemic issues within our department. I need information that's not on the surface." Maggie's lips pursed thoughtfully, her gaze drifting to the file cabinets. "You know that digging into these can put you on thin ice, especially with Henderson keeping a close eye on you." "I'm aware," Mark replied. "But we need to expose the truth. If it means risking my career, no, our careers, then so be it." Her silence hung heavily in the air before she nodded. "All right, but we'll need to tread carefully. If I dig into the archives, I'll need plausible deniability. They have eyes everywhere." Mark considered her caution and felt a swell of appreciation. She would be a partner in this cause. The shift in his thoughts centered on collaboration, not isolation. "Absolutely. I can cover for you if anyone asks. Just do what you do best. I'll gather intel from my end." A flicker of determination ignited in her eyes, and she straightened in her chair, her fingers already flying over the keyboard. 5 minutes into their conversation, her demeanor transformed. Focus radiated off her as she scoured the network for any records that could link past mishaps to ongoing issues, potentially exposing a wider web of deceit. Mark's confidence surged as he realized they were on the precipice of something worthwhile. Working alongside someone who shared his vision emboldened him further. He could feel the weight of the badge lift slightly, replaced by the belief that he was fighting for something real. As Maggie pulled up old case files, Mark leaned in, glancing at the array of documents. Old investigations that had seemingly dissolved into obscurity stood silently under the glow of her computer screen, an indirect indictment of their department's failures. He spotted a name, a familiar face twisted into a myriad of accusations that would require meticulously navigating the storm. Suddenly Maggie gasped, causing him to look up. She motioned him closer, and his heart raced at the thought of a significant discovery. With urgency, she pointed at the screen. "Look at these correlations. They didn't match up at the time, but..." The pieces began to fit, a puzzle he never knew he was solving. Mark felt a concoction of exhilaration and dread. The implications of what they were uncovering loomed large, and an intense realization cascaded over him. Each new fact demanded more courage than he'd anticipated. Just as they delved deeper into the murky waters of evidence, Mark's cell phone buzzed. A text message from Sarah flashed on the screen. "I need you to come back. There's something important we need to discuss." His heart constricted at the urgency in her words. This moment carried with it the reality that his path to justice intertwined with personal stakes. Feeling the weight of two worlds in collision, Mark faced a critical juncture. He could either grab hold of this newfound evidence or attend to Sarah's summoning. Both paths were fraught with unknown consequences, yet he instinctively felt the clock was ticking on both fronts. Would he abandon his investigation to attend to Sarah, or dive even deeper into the darkness awaiting discovery? As the tension escalated, Mark understood he had no choice. The true confrontation would soon arrive. But which truth would guide him forward? Mark stood frozen, the phone still vibrating in his hand. Instinctively, his mind raced through multiple scenarios, each more severe than the last. Sarah's tone could imply anything: danger, a revelation, or an emotional plea for reconciliation. Regardless, he knew he had to respond. "Maggie," he said, training himself to keep his voice steady. "I need to take this. Can you keep digging?" Maggie nodded, her eyes still glued to the screen. "We'll regroup later. Just be careful." As Mark stepped away, the precinct blurred around him. The stakes had shifted, multiplying with each step toward the exit. A tiny number revealed in the text carried consequences he still didn't fully grasp. Sarah had always been the one constant in an otherwise unpredictable life, his grounding force against the chaotic backdrop of his professional world. Now, she was the reason the chaos threatened to pull him under. The air outside was cooler, the faint smell of rain hinting at a storm. He could feel the tension tightening around his chest as he made his way to the parking lot. Each step seemed to amplify the dilemma crashing within him. He could return to his investigation, one that could dismantle a corrupt system, or he could face the woman whose life and struggles he was deeply entwined with. "Mark!" Sarah's voice cut through the cold drizzle. He turned quickly, catching a glimpse of her through the clusters of parked cars. Her expression was a blend of urgency and concern. She looked as if she'd been waiting for him. "Sarah," he breathed, closing the distance between them. "I'm so glad you came," she said, clutching her stomach. "I didn't know how to reach you. It's about the baby." Her words crashed over him like waves. That reality, fatherhood, family, a future, compounded the pressure of the revelations he was unearthing. "What's happening?" he asked, forcing down the swell of questions that threatened to spill forth. "I'd waited to tell you until after the doctors had done some tests, but it's complicated, Mark." She paused, visibly taking a deep breath to steady herself. "The pregnancy is high risk. They've suggested that I may need someone to help manage things, someone to be there for me." In that moment, all the chaos in his mind quieted. He felt the weight of responsibility settle upon his shoulders. This was no longer only about truths hidden in files or pointing fingers at the corrupt. This was personal. It blared louder than anything else he could face. Sarah needed him. "They're saying it could be a while until everything stabilizes," she continued, her voice trembling slightly. "I thought you'd want to know. I do, Sarah. I'd want to be there," he interrupted, feeling a sudden swell of resolve. While the investigation loomed large, this was the ground zero of his life. His family needed him now more than ever. The gravity of this choice bore down on him. He felt a deep, unsettling churn of guilt as thoughts of Maggie's diligent work flickered in his mind. Two paths still tugged at him, one that could prove systemic corruption and another rooted in personal devotion. How could he choose between emerging as a harbinger of change and stepping into the role of a father? After a pregnant pause, Mark met her gaze. "What do you need from me?" Her expression softened, yet he could see that the burden of her expectations weighed heavily on her. "Just be my partner, Mark. I can't do this alone." Their eyes locked, and in that unspoken moment, reassurance was tempered with guilt. He saw the flickering sunlight behind her, illuminating the possibility of a future they had dreamed about. He also felt the surge of adrenaline tied to his investigation, the rush of stories waiting to be told. He nodded slowly. "Okay. I'll be here for you, every step of the way." As Sarah sighed with relief, a quiet storm raged within Mark. His duty as a father collided with the instinct to unveil truths that could shake their world. In the back of his mind, a question festered. Would the truth set them free, or isolate them amidst the chaos? With every beat of his heart, the urgency of the two worlds he inhabited spiraled. Choices had consequences, and his commitment to Sarah might have unwittingly chained him to a path away from the evidence he felt compelled to chase. He could abandon his fight for justice, but soon he might find that the battle had only just begun. Yet the phone buzzed beside him, an ominous reminder that he was not finished with the shadows haunting their lives. The moment it slipped from his grasp, a message from Maggie popped into view. "I found something. You need to see this." With Sarah beside him, the tension tightened like a noose. Would he seize the moment and confront the darkness of his investigation, or would the weight of his promise to Sarah pull him into an uncharted future? The precipice loomed, and he felt time inch away. Which truth would ignite change, and what would it ultimately cost him? Mark's mind raced as he processed the message flashing on his screen. It felt as though the words from Maggie were calling out to him from a distant shore, where clarity and purpose awaited him. But here on the dock of his current reality, the waves of anxiety crashed violently, leaving him caught in an emotional riptide. "Sarah, I need to—" He hesitated, the dichotomy of his duties heavy on his shoulders. She was still watching him, her eyes wide with concern, each passing second amplifying the silence between them. "Need to what, Mark?" She pressed gently, though he sensed an unspoken fear lurking beneath her calm facade. "The case," he began, only to falter when wrestling with the implications of what he was about to say. Maggie found something important, something that might change everything. As her brow furrowed, Mark's resolve began to solidify. He realized that the unfolding investigation and his commitment to family were not necessarily opposing forces. Perhaps this was not about choosing one over the other. It could be about merging the two worlds for the greater good. "I can't ignore this, Sarah," he continued, deciding to lay bare his internal conflict. "But I'll make sure to be there for you too, I promise." Her expression softened, but there was still an edge of uncertainty. "I need you here, Mark. I can't face this alone. But I also see how much this matters to you. You need to do what feels right." Her words fell heavy on him, her understanding illuminating the path between their worlds. And even as he could feel the pull of duty urging him towards Maggie, and the promise of resolution, he was beginning to comprehend just how pivotal this moment was for his growth. "Okay," he said finally, steeling himself with this newfound clarity. "I'll check what Maggie found, but I'll come back to you right after. I promise to keep you updated, every step of the way." Mark turned and walked toward the parking lot, with Sarah's worried gaze following him. Each step felt loaded. The tension in the air seemed to thicken, as if the world itself was holding its breath. He climbed into his car and pulled out his phone again, mentally rehearsing what he would say to Maggie. As the engine roared to life, he sought to dislodge the duality swirling within. Part of him wanted to dive headfirst into the investigation, while another part clamored for the warmth of home and family. When he arrived at the station, Maggie was at her desk, papers strewn around her like leaves before a storm. The sight of her poised over evidence made him instinctively straighten his posture. She was determined in a way that reignited his commitment to the cause. "Mark, thank God you're here," she exclaimed, relief fluttering through her voice. "You have to see this." She slid a document across the table. It contained a series of transactions that didn't just implicate a corrupt officer in the precinct. It drew a line right back towards a network of organized crime he had barely begun to understand. As he scanned the details, a sense of foreboding flickered beneath the surface. Each name was another thread connecting a web of complicity that went beyond what he had begun to uncover. "This could unravel everything, Mark. If we can corroborate it, we might finally have a way to lean into justice," Maggie urged, her eyes bright with intense fervor. Her passion resonated within him, igniting that part of him that fought for change. Mark's pulse quickened. He realized that the darkness they were fighting against didn't just threaten his career or his family. It threatened everyone. Yet the gravity of this discovery was heavy, balancing precariously with his responsibilities to Sarah. "Look, Maggie, this is huge. But—" He hesitated, the thought of Sarah tugging at his heart. What do we do with it? If we expose this now, what if it's already too late? She interjected sharply, her tone laced with urgency. What if they know we're investigating? We have to act, Mark. If we wait too long, we could jeopardize everything. Your family, my career. He felt the shadows stretching and looming over him. Within the tension of choices lay a moment of revelation. It dawned on him that being a father didn't mean abandoning the fight for justice. It meant aligning them, creating a legacy for his child that resonated with integrity. I can't turn back now, he declared, his voice steadier as he tucked his phone away. I'm in. As he and Maggie began drafting a plan, the uncertainty of the future hung just beyond their reach. Mark wrestled with the impending consequences. There was little time, but a resolve began to solidify around the bond between his new roles. Each choice became more profound, and as he balanced work and family, the stakes elevated. Yet just as clarity began to illuminate Mark's path, his phone buzzed again. Another message from Sarah. He could feel panic creeping back in, urging him to question whether he could navigate both worlds without losing himself in the process. Mark, it read. I think I'm starting to feel something. We need to talk. It's important. As an unsettling chill washed over him, he wrestled with the chilling fear that perhaps the two aspects of his life were not as separate as he had hoped. What awaited him on each battlefield could shape everything he had come to know. The tension in Mark's chest tightened as he read Sarah's message, each word a heavier weight pulling him back to the personal turmoil he had hoped to momentarily set aside. He knew he should focus on the case at hand, but thoughts of Sarah's tone gnawed at him, imprinting concern deeper than the excitement of a potential breakthrough. Are you okay? He asked, glancing up at Maggie, who was busy arranging the scattered papers on the desk. Her focus seemed unyielding, driven by the urgency of their findings. It contrasted sharply with his spiraling anxiety as he typed a quick reply to Sarah, assuring her he'd be home soon. Mark, we need to prioritize this. We're on the brink of making a significant impact. Maggie's voice broke through his reverie. Her determination rekindled the part of him that craved answers and resolutions. It held the promise of a change he could be proud of, a legacy he could build. Right, he replied, pulling his chair closer to her desk, engaging in the task at hand. Let's strategize what our next steps should be. If we're going to take on this network, we need a coordinated approach. As they began plotting out their plan, Mark's mind fluctuated between the thrill of pursuit and the sinking weight of personal obligations. Each name he read on the documents felt like a tie, binding him tighter to a greater moral responsibility, compelling him to act. All while Sarah's unexpected message echoed like a drumbeat in his thoughts. Maggie's voice, impassioned and resolute, signaled a shift in focus. If we can link these transactions to the corruption within the department, it will create a ripple effect. The exposure won't just unveil the crimes, it'll give us leverage against whoever's manipulating everything behind the scenes. Her fervor resonated deeply. He found himself mesmerized by her relentless dedication, and it fueled something within him. I can help unravel this, he acknowledged, feeling his purpose sharpening. But we need to create a safe space to gather the evidence without raising any alarms. We have to think 3 steps ahead. Exactly. We can't let them know we're closing in. Otherwise, it's game over not just for us, but for anyone else involved, she affirmed, drawing lines across the documents, illustrating pathways he hadn't yet considered. The gravity of the situation ignited in him a sense of clarity and determination that transcended his internal struggles. But beneath this sense of commitment was the gnawing fear. Would he be able to return to Sarah, to reassure her of his presence, while he dove deeper into this dangerous underbelly? Mark, Maggie interrupted his thoughts again. We need to move quickly. Start cultivating our contacts. See who can give us the intel we need. Mark nodded, feeling the rush of adrenaline tighten his resolve. He pulled out his phone, his thumb hesitating over Sarah's thread. His heart raced as he typed, then deleted, then typed again, a cascade of emotions unraveling within him. Finally, he settled on a simple message. "I'm busy, but I'll be home soon. Let's talk then." The decision felt cowardly, but he couldn't allow Sarah's concerns to derail the critical work unfolding in front of him. As he returned his focus to the investigation, Mark felt the monstrous potential of what they were uncovering loom larger than his personal life. But just as excitement coursed through him, another disturbing message from Sarah arrived. "You're hiding something from me, aren't you?" The accusation seeped through the screen, laced with heartbreak and confusion. A knot formed in his stomach as he realized his dual life was beginning to pull them both apart. At that moment, he recognized that the consequences of his actions would settle heavily on his relationship with Sarah, a relationship he was desperately trying to protect. "Mark, we really need to keep pushing." Maggie's urgent tone cut through his thoughts, but the echo of Sarah's message hung in the air like an ominous cloud. "Are you with me?" Mark looked at Maggie, her face lit with determination. Yet he couldn't shake Sarah's unease from his mind. "Yeah," he replied, though uncertainty lingered in his voice. The stakes were higher than he had anticipated, and a question loomed. How much longer could he juggle his commitments before they began to fracture completely? The door to the future seemed wide open, yet within it lay the potential for total collapse as well. Would he find the strength to navigate the chaos before him without losing the ones he loved? With each passing moment, he could feel the weight of his choices pressing down hard, and as they prepared for the next step, a chilling thought gripped him. What if the truth, once revealed, changed everything? What if he wasn't ready for what lay ahead? Mark could feel the intensity within him shifting as he leaned closer to the flickering screen. The urgency of their investigation pressed like a vice against his chest. But even amidst the chaos, Sarah's disquiet loomed larger. He fully understood the implications of what lay ahead. He was straddling a treacherous line between his personal life and the compelling, relentless pursuit of justice. "Maggie," he said, his voice firm, "let's break down our leads. Who do we trust, and who could turn on us?" A plan slowly took shape, born from their need to balance the dangers of their investigation with their hopes for a brighter outcome. Yet, as they combed through the data, Mark felt a part of him screaming to voice his uncertainty to Maggie. Each revelation sparked hope, but in the silence of his mind, anxiety brewed. The walls felt like they were closing in, and the mounting pressure made it harder to ignore the impending confrontation with Sarah. Yet, marking his territory within this investigation felt essential. A chance to define his future and perhaps reshape his identity. Hours passed, their discussions punctuated by fervent debate over names and connections. Each name struck a chord deep within him. It was as though he were carving out a new section of his psyche with every link they established, sculpting a version of himself he desperately needed to embrace. The thrill of the hunt was exhilarating, yet he knew it came at a cost. As a detective, the thrill of executing a plan without compromise fed his ambition, while the remnants of his relationship with Sarah faded like a whisper. "We need a meeting with our contacts tomorrow," Maggie decided. "If we can secure testimonies or evidence before they catch wind of what we're up to, we'll have a fighting chance." With conviction, she traced her finger across the documents piled on the desk, leaving lines that seemed to connect the previous dots they had unearthed. "Absolutely," Mark agreed, yet a shadow loomed over his heart. The fear of disappointing Sarah was mounting, magnified by every second spent entrenched in this investigation. He had promised to be home soon, aware that she'd be waiting for him, needing him, but he worried that each moment was pulling him farther from her grasp. "Mark," Maggie moved, her voice dropping as she leaned toward him. "Is everything okay? You've been a bit off today." The concern in her eyes reflected genuine care, but also a hint of frustration at his distractedness. Mark forced a smile, pushing aside the swirling doubts. "Yeah, just, you know how it can be." He pivoted back to the papers, shuffling them as a distraction, yet it felt inadequate. The reality he was piecing together was all-consuming, but semblances of his former life taunted him, the laughter, the warmth, the comfort he found in Sarah's embrace. Could this case redefine him in a way that would make him a better partner to Sarah, Or was he heading toward a path of separation? They soon separated for the night, each retreating into their own thoughts. Mark's mind was a labyrinth of possibilities. Underneath the exhilaration of progress lay a plateau of anxiety that could collapse at any moment. While he attempted to drown his fears in the investigation's details, Mark could feel the tremors of a decision surfacing. He should call Sarah and lay it all out there, but the unknown bore a heavy weight. Would she understand? Could he risk creating a chasm large enough between them that honesty might tip the scales of their fragile trust? With trepidation, he drew out his phone and stared at Sarah's name. The desire to reach out fought with the hunger for resolution in his professional life. Just as uncertainty began to suffocate him, another message swung the balance. The phone chimed, and it was Maggie. "We're meeting early tomorrow, right? We need to decide how to handle any fallout." His fingers trembled as he typed a quick affirmation but then hesitated, torn between the realities of his dual existence. As he shut off his phone and turned towards his reflection in the darkened window, Mark encountered an urgency that felt frighteningly real. He had to face the truth, not just about his case, but also about himself. The tension of navigating his life had escalated to a boiling point, and he realized he couldn't merely balance both roles. One would have to take precedence. The moment of irrevocable choice loomed ahead, and he had no idea how the truth would affect everything: his career, his integrity, and the relationship he was desperately seeking to preserve. Would he finally confront Sarah tomorrow, risking everything for the transparency he now feared? With decisions looming and the stakes climbing higher, the question reverberated inside him. What would he sacrifice for the truth? Would it fracture the very foundations he sought to uphold? The fog of uncertainty thickened, and he realized the time had come to face not just the data, but also the man he was becoming. The morning sun filtered through the thin blinds, casting stripes of light across Mark's disheveled bed as he bolted upright, the weight of his decision settling heavily on him. This was it. The day promised a meeting with Maggie, a strategy to solidify their investigation, and the inevitable confrontation with Sarah. Trapped in a world caught between ethical dilemmas and personal sacrifice, Mark felt the gnawing urgency to re-establish boundaries for himself before they slipped away entirely. Making coffee, he tried to quell the tumult within by focusing on the scent of the brewing beans. Routine had always offered him solace, yet today it felt hollow. With each sip, he could feel flickers of doubt rising to the surface, mingling with the taste of bitterness. How would he gather the courage to explain his dedication to justice without undermining the love he felt for Sarah? Arriving at the office, he was greeted by Maggie's determined expression. The fire in her eyes reflected the fusion of urgency and ambition that had become their shared language. "We need to prioritize tracking down that informant today," she stated, her fingers tapping emphatically on the desk. "If they whistleblow before we can firm up our case, it'll be a disaster." They immersed themselves in planning, but Mark's mind twisted and turned, a relentless storm of conflict brewing beneath the surface of their conversation. Ideas shifted, strategies formed, yet he couldn't shake the feeling that he was a ghost within his own body. Every word exchanged with Maggie stirred a worry about Sarah, the tension between the two realities pulling him apart. As they laid out their approach, Maggie's insights illuminated avenues previously unseen. "You have a knack for interviews, Mark," she noted, her voice cutting through the fog of his distraction. "You can read people, gauge their intentions better than most. It's a talent. It's how we'll get what we need." The comment struck him unexpectedly, igniting a spark amidst the shadows of self-doubt. He realized that within this chaotic investigation, he had unearthed an intrinsic part of himself. It was as if each step taken in this relentless pursuit of justice was another brushstroke on the canvas of who he was becoming, a messy yet vibrant illustration of resilience and determination. Yet as the fear of letting others down clawed at him, he hesitated. Could he embrace this new version without losing the warmth of his relationship? For so long, Mark had believed that love and duty were at odds, but now he questioned whether they could coexist. Was it possible that his commitment to truth could strengthen his bond with Sarah, allowing them both room to grow? The clock seemed to crawl as he and Maggie strategized. Just when their plans felt solid, Mark's phone buzzed. Heart racing, he picked it up, only to be greeted by a message from Sarah, filled with warmth, but also the residual worry. "I miss you. Are you okay?" The weight of her words washed over him, a reminder of the love waiting at home. What earlier felt like a drumming anxiety now morphed into not just love, but a responsibility to confront the truth. As unsettling as it felt, honesty could forge a path through the uncertainty that he either feared or craved. With fire rekindled within him, Mark took a deep breath. "I'll have to speak to Sarah tonight," he resolved, internalizing both the risk and the opportunity in equal measure. Ignoring the doubts, the chaos of the investigation, and still being a part of Sarah's world were dualities he had to navigate, but perhaps they intertwined more deeply than he had dared to consider. As he refocused on Maggie and the day's work ahead, a new clarity emerged from the clouds of uncertainty. He felt anchored to his purpose. The case held promise not simply for justice, but also for personal growth. "I'm ready," he declared, more to himself than to Maggie, sensing the need for transformation. But as the day progressed and their investigation deepened, Mark grappled with one question. Could he truly confront the profound changes taking place within him without sacrificing the love he held dear? With the clock ticking down to their meeting that night, Mark realized one truth. The evolution of his professional self was inextricably linked to his emotional foundation, and tonight, he would finally reach for clarity, one way or another. A final charge surged through him as they plotted their next move. With the evidence mounting, he understood this was not just a confrontation with Sarah. It was an exploration of the man he could become, and the sacrifices he might need to make. What would he reveal about himself in the unfolding drama that awaited him? Would it shatter him, or set him free? The answers teetered dangerously on the brink, and only time would tell. Mark stood in the soft glow of his living room, the anticipation of truth radiating alongside the electric hum of anxiety in the air. This was the moment he had both yearned for and dreaded. He could sense the weight of the decisions made over the last few weeks layering upon him like a heavy cloak. Each moment had propelled him closer to a confrontation, not just with Sarah, but with himself. "Sarah," he called out gently, his voice tinged with the apprehension of a man standing at the threshold of pivotal change. She emerged from the hallway, a hint of uncertainty flickering across her features. That flicker was a reflection of his own internal turmoil. The path to honesty was strewn with risks that could either fuse their hearts tighter or fracture them forever. "Hey," she smiled faintly, a veil of worry shrouding her expression. "I was just thinking about you. How was work?" He approached, each step earnest and deliberate. "We discovered some significant evidence, but—" He paused, gauging her emotional temperature. "I need to talk to you about something important. About us." Sarah's brow knitted together. "You've been distant. What's really going on?" Mark's heart raced. This was the moment to drop the facade and step into vulnerability, a stepping stone towards authenticity. "I've been overwhelmed, Sarah. My job, it's consuming. But I realized it isn't just the case that's troubling me. It's that I've been trying to navigate a path that separates the truth of who I want to be from the love I have for you." As the words tumbled out, he could see her expression shift, caution unveiling itself into curiosity. "You're talking about the investigation. You're still too deep in this, Mark. You can't believe it will solve everything automatically." "I know," he replied, grounding his voice with purpose. "But I need you to understand. I've felt trapped, torn between two realities. I want to fight for justice within the department, but I also felt the strain that pulls us apart. I can't live in that duality anymore." Her face softened, and he could sense her former worries being replaced by a flicker of hope. "You're scared of losing us, aren't you?" "More than I can express," he admitted, dropping his gaze momentarily before looking up into her eyes, searching for resonance. "And that's why I need to tell you everything. I want us to face this together. Someone shouldn't have to go through this alone. I don't want to just fight for a cause. I want to build something real with you." The silence that followed was heavy, yet it pulsated with potential. Eventually, she stepped closer, a shared vulnerability sparking in the space between them. "What do you want to build, Mark? What does that look like?" With clarity surfacing within him, he revealed, "A future that doesn't shadow our love behind uncertainties. I want to raise our family grounded in truth, not the tempest of fear. I've come to realize that nothing will matter if we can't be open and honest with each other." Tears brimmed in Sarah's eyes, but amidst that emotion she nodded. "Then let's build that together. Whatever comes next, let's face it side by side." Relief washed over him. The weight of his secret lifted slightly, realizing that he hadn't just reached for the truth. He had bolstered their connection. "You deserve to know everything," he continued, inhaling deeply. "I've stumbled upon deep-rooted corruption. It doesn't just involve allegations from your father's past. It connects to a criminal network targeting our city." "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "In my pursuit of justice, I've found evidence that reveals much more than a single disgraced officer. It's systematic. I need to act, and I want you with me every step. I don't want to hold anything back anymore. If that means risking my job and my relationship with my colleagues, then I'm willing to do it, because you and our family are what matters most." Sarah's expression evolved from confusion to fierce pride. "Mark, you don't have to do this alone. I might not have those instincts like you do, but I can help. Whatever you need, we'll figure it out." The quiet surge of shared strength flowed between them, breaking any lingering apprehension. Mark caught his breath, feeling transformative clarity seep into his bones. He hadn't just taken a step towards honesty. He had forged a resolute partnership, a powerful affirmation that vulnerability holds the potential for monumental strength. After a reflective pause, he made a decision. "I'm going to share what I've discovered at work tomorrow." The determination resonated like a heartbeat, a promise solidified in commitment. He knew the storm that awaited, but felt better prepared with Sarah beside him. "But let's do it together. We can't keep hiding behind shadows. This is our chance to reshape our future." "Together," she echoed, each syllable full of resolve. As they clasped hands, a powerful promise sealed their commitment to each other and to the truth. Later that night, as they sat together in quiet understanding, their future unfurled like a myriad of possibilities, each intertwined with honesty, collaboration, and a new sense of purpose. Mark felt himself lean into that warmth, and for the first time in recent memory, there was clarity guiding his steps forward. He embraced the uncertainty ahead, not as a threat, but as a chance to conquer. He felt whole again, ready to cherish love and justice simultaneously. This was a commitment to transformational growth, not just personally, but as a couple, turning their vulnerability into a foundational pillar for their future. Together they were no longer only Mark and Sarah. They were allies bound by a common mission, intricately navigating the complex tapestry of truth they would soon unravel. Mark had indeed achieved. He had conquered doubts, embraced vulnerability, and formed a solid partnership grounded in integrity. As they settled into the moment, it became clear that this was more than a conclusion. It was an awakening. The life ahead promised a future painted with tenacity, trust, and an enduring love that would weather any storm. This was the turning point, the moment where clarity had ushered in undeniable change, where both truth and love triumphed together. Now is the time to reflect on this journey and share your thoughts. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support means everything. Comment with your reactions and thoughts on Mark and Sarah's journey. Share this story with at least 5 friends who need to witness this incredible conclusion right now. Don't wait even one more second to show your support. Only true fans of personal growth stories understand the power of community.